We begin, though, with the new developments in the clash between former President Trump and the Justice Department over those classified documents.
A federal judge in Florida has granted Trump's request for a third-party arbiter known as a special master. That person will review the sensitive materials seized from the former president's Mar-a-Lago estate. Once appointed, the special master will screen for any documents protected by either attorney-client or executive privilege. It's a major setback to the Justice Department, temporarily blocking parts of its criminal investigation. We are covering it this morning with NBC News Justice correspondent Ryan Riley and legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Good morning to both of you. Ryan, we'll start with you. So in that ruling, the judge, Aileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, talked about the unprecedented nature of this search. She wrote that as a former president, any indictment that relied on materials that should have been returned would result in, quote, reputational harm of a decidedly different order of magnitude. What more can you tell us about how the judge came to this decision?
You know, this is a pretty unprecedented decision because I think that, had her order been limited to just questions of attorney-client privilege, the Justice Department could have lived with it. But she went much further than that, and she went into this really unexplored area of the law in terms of executive privilege. Executive privilege rests with the current executive. That's, for anyone who didn't know, that's Joe Biden. So he's the one who gets to decide whether or not executive privilege would really apply in this situation. And Donald Trump had the opportunity to assert executive privilege over all of those documents he wasn't supposed to have that he turned over in January when the National Archives informed his counsel that the FBI was going to be examining those documents. And then later on, in response to a subpoena, he turned over more classified documents that he wasn't supposed to have. And then finally, on August 8th, when they finally searched it, they found all of these new materials, including 11,000 pages of government documents and hundreds of pages of classified documents that he wasn't supposed to have at his Mar-a-Lago compound. So really, a lot of this is pretty unprecedented, and it really could be important who they end up appointing as this special master, because they're going to have some really complicated issues, and it's not a job that many folks are going to want because they're obviously going to come under attack from Trump in the future.
Danny, let's bring you in here and tell us, so what does this ruling mean for the government's investigation? Is it likely we could see an appeal?
It means delay. It means the government is going to be halted, at least for the time being, in reviewing documents. Might we see an appeal? On the one hand, maybe. If the Trump team had lost, I guarantee they'd be appealing. That is their M.O. That is their strategy. They appeal as far as they can, all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the government is in a slightly different position. They have to assess whether or not it is worth their while to appeal and potentially delay this even further. Can the government live with this existing delay? Given that the government has already reviewed most of these documents. Yes, they gave some of them to a filter team, but the filter team is staffed by the government. So they've already reviewed all the documents. They can probably live with the delay. I'd be surprised to see if they appeal this.
So, Ryan, I mean, the judge specifically mentioned this ruling won't stop the intelligence community's ongoing assessment of whether those classified documents harmed national security. The FBI and Justice Department are, of course, part of the intelligence community. Help us understand who can review these materials and maybe how those parallel probes overlap.
Joe, it's a really good question, and I'm not sure it's one that the judge, this 41-year-old Trump appointee, really considered in depth here, because this is a really unexplored area, and it really is pretty unprecedented for a judge to issue an order which essentially prevents future investigation of materials that was lawfully seized. This was all lawfully done. Another judge approved this because there was plenty of probable cause that Donald Trump continued to hold these materials at his Mar-a-Lago estate, and that was in fact true because they showed up and they found all of these materials. So the probable cause statement that was used to get this search warrant was true because we found out what materials were there. So we really are in pretty unprecedented territory here, and I really do think that whoever the special master is would have their job cut out for them. But, as Danny said, it's a question of whether or not they're going to appeal this. Of course, if they did appeal this, they're going to be stuck with a bunch of Trump judges on that appeals court. And they've stacked the 11th court pretty well there as well. So, Donald Trump's going to have a good go potentially there. And then if this gets to the Supreme Court, he's also got a good outlook there, although there have been plenty of instances where the Supreme Court has ruled against him, if you want to look back to the 2020 election on all his false claims about the election, for example, there. But this is really a big question about what DOJ is going to do here, and they're facing a major decision about whether or not to appeal this.
Let's talk about who it could be then and how we're going to figure that out. So the judge gave Trump's legal team and the Department of Justice until Friday to name special master candidates. Walk us through just how that process works, and also what would that mean? What type of security clearances would that person mean, given the nature of the documents?
The answer to how the process works is good luck. The judge said these parties have to submit a joint filing. Do you know what that means? That means they have to agree. Can you imagine over the next week? Is it going to be by email? Are they going to have phone conferences? These two sides hate each other. How in the world are they going to agree on a joint filing of, yeah, here's a list of potential special masters, and we're fine with both of them? No way. The DOJ wants nothing but former judges who are former prosecutors, and the Trump team obviously wants anybody who is aligned with the Trump team in their view. That's their ideal special masters. So I am fascinated. We may never know the back and forth, but they have to file something this week.
Do we know what happens if they can't even come up with one name together?
That is a possibility. Yeah. I can see them getting to Wednesday and saying, and putting in a filing, essentially, Your Honor, we give up. Yeah. We just can't seem to agree on a list. I expect they'll come to an agreement, but I hold out hope that we'll see that filing, because that would be really interesting.
All right, Danny, Ryan, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Very interesting. Thanks, guys. All right, now turning to severe weather along the East Coast, where heavy rainfall and severe flooding brought a halt to Labor Day weekend celebrations for millions of people. These are just some of the images from this weekend's storm. Cars in Rhode Island were submerged along this highway near Providence. And in Georgia, the flooding caused severe damage to the water system in Somerville, prompting officials to issue a boil water advisory. There's a little bit of good news in Jackson, Mississippi, though. State leaders say they're one step closer to getting clean water running again.
7 days later, I'm very happy to report that we have returned water pressure to the city. The tanks are full or filling. There are currently 0 water tanks at low levels.
We'll have more from Jackson when we speak with Mayor Chokwe Lumumba coming up later this hour.
As the East Coast recovers from a weekend of severe flooding out west in California, firefighters are battling several deadly wildfires. At least 2 people were killed in the Fairview fire, which began 80 miles outside of Los Angeles on Monday. Comes just days after 2 people were killed in the Mill fire, tearing through the community of Weed in Northern California. The state has been facing an elevated risk of fire weather, with several more days of record high temperatures ahead. Captain Robert Foxworthy joins us now. He is a public information officer with CAL FIRE. Captain Foxworthy, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We mentioned there are a number of fires burning throughout the state right now. What are the ones that concern you the most?
So, obviously any fires that are burning in a populated area and affecting the public are the ones that are the most concerning, right? We have a list of priorities, obviously life safety being number one. So any fires that are affecting the public and individuals, those are the ones that are up at the top of the priority list.
California, we know, has been dealing with these record high temperatures, heat that fuels the fires, but it drains your firefighters. I mean, what kind of toll is this taking on your team? And do you have enough firefighters right now to get all of the fires under control?
So currently we're in our peak staffing. So we're staffed up at CAL FIRE with all of our engines, crews, dozers fully staffed and ready for the season. Obviously, these longer, more intense fire seasons do have effects on the crews. This is what we train for, and this is what firefighters get ready for year round. I would be lying if I didn't say that these continued fires are tough on the crews, but it's what we train for and we're ready for.
Over the past decade, we know the wildfire season seems to get longer and longer each year. The conditions seem to be getting worse and worse. I mean, fire season is basically year-round now. Help us understand the behavior of these fires, how that has changed, what it is you're seeing on the front lines.
I've been with this department for over 20 years, and I can very easily say that fires have changed since I started back in the early 2000s. Our seasons are getting longer. It's actually not even a fire season anymore. I'd now consider it a fire year, just for the fact that at least somewhere in the state of California, we can have a fire happen at any time of the year, no matter when it is. So even up in far northern California, where they used to be shorter seasons, they're getting longer. Any time of the year we could get a fire. They're burning hotter. They're burning later in the year. And you can see by the numbers for the last, especially about 10 years or so, they're becoming more damaging as well.
All right, Captain Robert Foxworthy, we're thinking of you and all of your crews out there. Thank you for taking a few moments to speak with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, that threat of flash flooding continues for part of the country this morning. For more on that, let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Michelle Grossman is with us. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Good morning. The weather extremes continue today. We are watching flooding this morning, heavy rain falling in Boston, Philly, also D.C., New York City. You're going to see heavy rain as well. The rain is falling there. We're looking at heavy rain falling where you see the brighter colors, the yellows, the reds, the oranges. That's where the heaviest rain is falling. And we do have a flood watch for many of us this morning. 50 million at risk for flash flooding throughout this morning. So it's going to be a slow commute for many of us as we go throughout the day today. And that flood watch is all the way from portions of New England throughout the Northeast into the Mid-Atlantic. Where you see this little red box, we are looking at a flash flood warning. So portions of Connecticut, also Pennsylvania, right near Philadelphia, you are included on that. We're going to see flooded roadways. We had the flooding yesterday in Providence, Rhode Island, where 7 inches of rain fell in a short amount of time, about 3 hours. So we saw some stranded cars. People had to get on medians to get out of the water on I-95. And that is the risk once again today. So a flash flood risk where you see the darker blue, that is a slight risk. That's the likeliest spot of seeing some flash flooding. That does include Boston, includes New York City. It also includes Charleston, West Virginia. So the Appalachians, we could see some flash flooding as well. Your rainfall forecast, 5 to 8 inches of rain. This is beneficial rain. We are in a drought in many of these spots, but it's coming fast and it's furious, and that's the problem. That's what happened yesterday, and that's what we're seeing with these storms, where we're seeing heavy rain falling very fast. So here's the setup, a slow-moving system lingering throughout the day. We have training storms, we have stationary storms, and that's dropping a lot of rain. We're seeing rainfall rates of over 2 inches per hour. We saw that yesterday. It's a very tropical air mass, and we're going to see that once again today. So really wet on the East Coast. We're hot and dry once again out west. 46 million impacted by a heat advisory or an excessive heat warning. Where you see that hot pink, that is an excessive heat warning. So Redding, Sacramento, Fresno, Los Angeles, you're going to see temperatures once again into the 90s and well into the triple digits. So look at some of these temperatures. 112 in Bakersfield, 103 in Salt Lake City. Same story tomorrow. 111 in Redding, 107 in Las Vegas. And this extends into Friday, into the early part of the weekend. And then we get a little bit of relief by the second part of the weekend. But Denver still warm Wednesday, Thursday. We're looking at temperatures near 100 degrees in Phoenix into the triple digits. So you guys, it's still hot there. We're going to see this heat wave continuing at least for the next 4 or 5 days.
Just no relief for the West.
No.
My goodness.
No,
yeah,
wow.
I know.
Right. Thanks, Michelle. And now to Uvalde, Texas, and the start of the new school year. Children are returning to their classroom this morning for the first time since the tragic mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in May. The school year normally starts in August, but district officials pushed back the first day to give everyone more time to prepare, as teachers and families are still reeling over the shooting that killed 19 students and 2 teachers. And while Robb Elementary, the physical building, is set to be demolished, students have the option to return to in-class instruction at one of 3 other elementary schools or opt for online classes. As you can see, NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson joins us now. She's in Uvalde, Texas. Hey, Priscilla, good to see you. So just talk about the mood first in Uvalde today as parents are returning, as kids are returning, parents are still thinking about their kids going to the classroom. What's going on there in town?
Savannah, good morning. There's certainly a lot of anticipation and fear and anxiety around this first day of school. You mentioned the mood here. It's been interesting. I've been here the past several days, and on one hand, you see this community rallying on Friday night as the football team won their home game, and at the Labor Day parade on Saturday, you see kids and parents smiling. But belying all of that is this incredible grief and loss that still remains remains. And I had an opportunity to speak to some of those parents and grandparents of students who will be returning at that Labor Day parade. And what I heard is that they are worried. They're not sure that the new measures that are being put in place here would prevent this from happening again. At the same time, there are a lot of parents who are saying their kids need to be learning in a classroom. They need that social interaction, and so they want to see if this is going to work. Take a listen to what one parent told me.
We went to school to meet the teachers, and we saw a lot of state troopers out there. Hopefully it helps, you know, and I heard they have 6 or 8 troopers at school now, plus police, so hopefully things get better.
Hope to catch up soon.
And so there is some optimism, but there are also more than 130 families here who are opting to have their students learn virtually, saying that it is simply too painful for them to return to the classroom right now. Savannah?
Absolutely. We're going to talk with the family in just a moment who feels that way. I mean, Priscilla, this is clearly a very difficult day, and I would imagine it can bring back a lot of trauma from that tragic day, walking back to the doors of a school. What kind of emotional support is the district providing for students as they return?
Absolutely, Savannah. And as you mentioned, no students will be returning to Robb Elementary. They're going to be spread out across 3 different campuses this year, and they're going to be intermixed with other students. And so there are going to be comfort dogs that will be on campus for the first 3 weeks to help those students transition and sort of get through the initial weeks of school. And the district has also been working to staff up on social workers and counselors. The goal is to have at least one social worker or counselor on every campus for the entirety of this school year to support those students. Savannah?
And what are the new safety protocols and procedures in place for this school year to ensure the children and school staff safety?
Yeah, the district has made a lot of changes. Some of that you see behind me, the 8-foot non-scalable fencing that we've seen go up around schools around the city. They're also implementing a number of other measures. There are 500 security cameras that have been put in place. They have audited the Wi-Fi and the locks on the doors. They're also going to have campus monitors who will be checking those locks on doors and on gates to make sure that those are secure. And there are also going to be more than 30 state police officers, Texas Department of Public Safety officers that will be stationed at the campuses here. And that is a bit of a point of contention. As we know, there were almost 100 DPS officers that were at Robb Elementary on the day that this tragedy unfolded. But still, they are going to be here. They are going to be monitoring. They're going to be watching those entrances and exits, and all of that in an effort to make parents feel more secure and feel that their parents will be safe throughout the school year. Savannah?
All right, Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much.
We do want to bring in Adam Martinez. He's a father of 2 students who went to Robb Elementary School. Adam, we've spoken with you before, so thank you for joining us again. First and foremost, I just want to know, how are your kids doing as the school year gets underway?
Well, right now they're just really happy that they're going to go virtual. That's their number one concern, is actually having to go back. When you're scared to death of something, it's really hard to worry about other things. I mean, it's not that they're afraid to go make a speech or something that we get nervous about. They really are scared for their lives. And so, yeah, that's the biggest concern right now that they have.
Adam, talk to us about making that decision to do virtual schooling rather than having your kids return to one of these 3 other elementary schools that Robb Elementary students are being spread among. What were conversations like to come to that decision?
Well, originally the decision was to get these safety protocols up to par and then try to get back to school. But when my son said that he doesn't feel like the cops are going to protect him if something happens, they're not going to go in, they're not brave enough, they need to get rid of those cops, that's when it became a brainer, because we don't want to take a risk. And even if we do take that risk, children can't learn when they're constantly in fear for their lives.
Priscilla just outlined some of the changes the district has made, more officers, more cameras. But you mentioned the concern your kids have. Do you think anything would ever make it easier for your kids to return to school? Is there any way to make it safe enough where they'd say, hey, we will go back?
Well, when I told him that Pete was fired because we've been protesting for a long time, that put a big smile on his face. So I think just more accountability and time as well to heal. We can build some more confidence in the law enforcement. As far as safety protocols, there's fencing in some areas, but there's no fencing in a lot of the other areas. Flores Elementary has no fencing right now.
Do you like that aspect of the plan? Does that make you feel better for the schools that do have that fencing? I know that's something some families have voiced concerns over, this 8-foot non-scalable fencing. What do you think about that as a potential to help?
I think if that 8-foot fence would have been up, I really don't think that shooter would have been able to climb it. So I think it's a step in the right direction if they can get it completed. I think it's, I looked at it, it doesn't look like you can climb it. So I think it really is a good fence.
You mentioned last month the Uvalde School Board fired the district police chief, Pete Arredondo, who was accused of failing to take control of the scene and wasting time. Obviously, you feel that was the right decision. What's been the impact of that decision, and do you want to see more accountability? What does that look like to you?
Well, the parents weren't very happy because it took so long. But like I said, it's a step in the right direction. I think there was failures all the way around, from the administrative staff to all the other law enforcement. So I think as they start to wrap up investigations and things start to happen, I feel like we'll be able to start healing a little bit more.
Adam Martinez, thank you so much for taking some time to join us this morning. We're thinking of your kids in your community on this day as kids return to class.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And now there are new developments overnight in the ongoing investigation into a missing jogger in Memphis, Tennessee. Police say they discovered a body while searching for Eliza Fletcher Monday evening, but officials say they have not yet confirmed the identity of the body, and the cause of death is still unknown. It comes just one day after a man was arrested in connection with the kidnapping. Police say his DNA was found on sandals near the site where Fletcher was abducted. 34-year-old Eliza Fletcher was last seen on a surveillance video on Friday when she was forced into an SUV during her morning jog.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.